All right. This is working, great. Well, welcome to day 3. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for joining us for this conversation about success in venture capital and how we're both measuring it and working towards the achievement of success. So I'm Fernando Fabre. I'm the CEO of the Kauffman Fellows. Let me start briefly by discussing what the Kauffman Fellows is, just for those of you that don't know us. We've been around for almost 30 years now. We define ourselves as a lifelong community for venture capitalists. We have over 940 venture capitalists in our network that have taken our education program and are part of the active community today, from over 680 venture capital firms, close to 60 countries. Interesting, and I'll talk more about this in a moment, but if you look at startups that became unicorns, those are valued at $1 billion or more over the last 10 years, and are currently alive, 1 out of 5 unicorns have a Kauffman Fellow on the cap table, which speaks volumes about the quality of the network that we represent. And again, over the last 10 years, the sum of the valuation of exits of the startups invested by Kauffman Fellows is almost $1/3 trillion throughout. The last thing I'll mention about the Kauffman Fellowship is that every year we bring in about 50 to 60 venture capitalists early on their careers. By early, we mean venture capitalists that have been around for 5, 6, 7 years, maybe a little bit less, of investment experience specifically in venture, meaning they haven't seen a full completed cycle. And they join a 2-year education program focused on excellence in consistently delivering good results to their investors and to the entrepreneurs. After the 2-year program is completed, you remain an active fellow through our community and our platform that is incredibly active. These are some of the firms that Kauffman Fellows have left: Emergence Capital, Creandum, Beco Capital, McVC, Tribe Capital, Endeavor Catalyst, many others. And you'll get to meet some of them in a few minutes right after this panel. One of the most important points that we want to make today is the definition of success in venture capital, which I think it's important to talk about, especially today, after what the industry has seen over the last 5 to 10 years. Sort of this approach to back to basics, back to the discipline of being a venture capitalist as a profession. And that starts with defining success. And success, we are coining it as achieving excellence and consistently finding, investing, supporting, and exiting what we call category and firm-defining startups. And I'll spend a moment to talk about some of the keywords in this very large definition. So first of all, excellence in consistently investing in startups. By that means that venture capital is a long game. As a venture capitalist, do you consistently invest in startups throughout the years, as opposed to just in any particular given cycle? Like, for example, what happened in 2021 or 2022. And the second component of this definition of success is the difference between investing and supporting category-defining startups versus firm-defining startups. And the reason why I think this is important is because a lot of venture capital firms have been able to invest in category-defining startups. Define those as, if you started a company and reaches $1 billion valuation, more likely than not, you are defining or being part of redefining the industry that you operate in. The entrepreneurs might be very successful, but that doesn't mean that the venture capital firm is being successful. Now, having the ability to exit that investment and getting distributions back to your limited partners, that would be more consistent with the definition of success for venture capital. Now, so if you invest in a startup that becomes a unicorn, you invested in what we would call a category-defining startup. If that startup exits, providing distribution, more likely than not, that exit builds part of the reputation of your venture capital firm. So those are the ones we call firm-defining startups. So in the sense of measuring the success of venture capital, which is what I'm going to talk in a moment, we are counting the number of unicorns that venture capitalists have invested in over the last 10 years. And as a measure of firm-defining startups, it's those unicorns that had an exit at $1 billion plus valuation, again, over the last 10 years. So that's a combination of variables. And then the last thing on how we measure success is that we assign equal weight to 3 different categories. The number of unicorns in your portfolio that you invested before they became a unicorn, the number of unicorns in your portfolio that have had an exit at $1 billion plus, that's the second metric with 1/3 of the weight. And the last metric is the sum of the valuation at exit of those startups, also with 1/3 of the weight. Now, you may have heard of the Midas list, which is a comprehensive data approach to measuring success of individual attribution of venture capitalists. Our approach is relatively similar in that we are focused on measuring exit valuations, number of unicorns, whatnot. What makes us different is, number one, to be eligible to participate in our ranking, Midas list has a cutoff of $200 million exit valuation at IPO. We're raising the bar at $1 billion. So in a way, it's a little bit harder to be on our ranking than on Midas. For time frame, Midas uses the last 5 years. We're using the last 10 years because 10 years is more consistent with the life cycle of a venture capital firm. And last, the type of venture capital firms that can be measured through our ranking. For Midas list, you have to apply, and they only focus on what we're going to call traditional venture capital models, managing third-party money of multiple LPs. We are including alternative models of venture capital that are innovative, such as solo GPs, corporate VCs, even family offices, with alternative models investing directly. But again, both methodologies are data-driven, and success starts at the exit of a startup. Some of our findings, we gathered data both from PitchBook, from CB Insights, and from Crunchbase through the APIs. We pulled data for the last 10 years. Once we collected all that information, we surveyed our 940 fellows, which means that I believe we have built the most, or one of the most comprehensive unicorn lists currently in the world. And this is measuring unicorns all over the world, not just US, where some of these tools like PitchBook are highly concentrated in. Roughly 250,000, and roughly because I really don't know this number if it's accurate or not, but let's say, give or take, 250,000 startups have raised venture capital over the last 10 years. What I think is more important is that there's 1,800 of those, so less than 1%, 0.7%, that have achieved unicorn status. Of those, 1,400 remain as a unicorn today. Many of those probably shouldn't be a unicorn, but that's a different topic. Today, they are currently valued at $1 billion plus, and 300 have had an exit north of $1 billion. So keep that number in mind. 300 startups over the last 10 years, 311, have achieved an exit north of $1 billion out of 250,000 startups that have raised venture capital. Part of the challenge with data like this is that 2021 and part of 2022 are biasing a lot of these by pulling a lot of companies that got minted as a unicorn in those years, part of the lack of discipline, if you want. But even if we remove 2021 and 2022 from the data, the average number of unicorns minted every year is roughly 100. What's interesting is that if you look at the number of exits of unicorns throughout the last 10 years, the average, whether you leave 2021 and 2022 or keep them inside of the survey, the average number of exits is 30. That doesn't change across the years. So the discipline of the market at exit remained, even though the discipline at minting unicorns was not there. And the last thing I'll mention before moving on to the ranking and invite our panel is the geographic distribution of unicorns goes something like this. If you think 1 out of 4 unicorns gets minted in California, 1 out of 5 unicorns get minted in China. California and China are minting roughly the same number. 1 out of 4 unicorns get minted in the rest of the US, and 1 out of 4 minted in the rest of the world. For the fund returner index, like I mentioned, 1 out of 5 unicorns have a Kauffman Fellow on the cap table. 1 out of 5 exited unicorns in the world have a Kauffman Fellow on the cap table, or have one. And last, this is the fund returner index. We measure the top 50 fellows. This is just showing you 10 of them. Very happy that we're going to have a couple of them here with us on the list. One thing that I want to mention about this is you can look at the number of unicorns and their exits and the sum of valuation at exits. But what's interesting is that the diversity of alternative models to venture capital represented just on the top 10. We have corporate VCs, we have minority stake venture capital models, we have secondaries only venture capital models, we have multiple geographies. So we will be talking more about this, and for that I invite our panelists to join me on stage, please. Welcome. Thank you. All right, so we have 30 minutes, and what we have thought of is discussing more about this measure of success in venture as the excellence in consistently investing in amazing startups, and then hopefully exiting from them as well. Before we get started, I would like to ask our panelists to introduce yourself, the work that you're doing, and anything related to the uniqueness of your venture capital model, both in the structure of it, but also in the geography or scope of your work. Areije, why don't we start with you?
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Areije Shakar, and I'm the CEO of Babco Energy Ventures out of Bahrain. In the past, I've also managed a fund of funds out of Bahrain as well, investing in different funds in the region, and currently setting up the corporate venture for the oil and gas company.
Dilek?
Hi, everyone. Dilek Dayınlarlı. I define myself as a venturepreneur, founder of ScaleX Ventures, early stage investing in deep tech, AI, infra companies. With a uniqueness that you asked, I mainly leverage Turkish Nexus as a talent pool. I help companies to go global and do that with the successful unicorn founders surrounding them around our young founders.
Allen?
Good morning, everyone, and great job fair. That's great to see. My name is Alan Taylor. For friends in the audience who know me, you know that I don't usually sound like this. I've completely lost my voice after 2 days of FII, but I'm honored to be here. I'm thrilled to be here. I work for an amazing organization called Endeavor. I've worked for Endeavor for the last 18 years, and 12 years ago, we layered a venture capital fund on top of Endeavor, and that has proven to be just an amazing model to produce great results. It was great to see that Kauffman confirmed that recently. But our model is unique in that we focus on emerging and underserved geographies all around the world. So think Latin America, the Middle East, Africa, Southeast Asia, and underserved parts of Europe and the United States. And we make very small minority co-investments into each one of the businesses, producing essentially these portfolios of 150, even 200 companies in a single fund. Right, and we'll talk about that because I think it's a really unique model.
Omar.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your time today. My name is Omar Darwazah. I'm a co-founder of a firm called AF Management that I started in 2016. We raise capital from the Middle East and invest in venture-backed startups in Silicon Valley, as well as emerging managers in their funds 1 and 2. Our latest fund, which is anchored by Mubadala Capital, one of the sovereigns in Abu Dhabi, is a hybrid fund, which is, again, a unique model. We put 30% of the capital in emerging managers that are starting their firms or are on their second vintage, and then 70% of their capital, of the capital of the fund, is earmarked to invest in the most promising seed and Series A ideas that are emanating from those portfolios.
Thank you. So let me jump into the next question, and again, this hopefully becomes more a conversation than me just asking the questions, but I remember, Alan, you'll be also help me with 12 years ago, a conversation with Ben Horowitz at a panel that you and I were there. He was basically saying to be successful in venture capital, you have to live and breathe in Silicon Valley, and if you're not, good luck with that. Here we are 15 years later with actual data showing that, sure, 1 in 4 25% that's true, 75% that's elsewhere. I would love to hear from all of you in the achievement of that consistency of success throughout your careers. What jumps out at you? What are you finding that is incredibly a missed opportunity, if you want, by everyone else? What have you seen that no one else has been able to see?
Yeah, I'll go first if you want. I remember well that panel in San Francisco where Ben basically told the audience, look, venture only works in Silicon Valley. If you want to do it, you got to move here, right? And I think 12 years later, we've really shown that's just not true, right? I think the cohort data here where you sort of show of all these unicorns and exits, 1 out of 4 are in California and 1 out of 4 are in China. Okay, that's half the world. But 1 out of 4 is the rest of the US and 1 out of 4 is the rest of the world, right? I think that's really remarkable to see. In our case, Endeavor has been around since 1997. We've been working with coaching, mentoring, helping, supporting great entrepreneurs. But when we went to start a fund in 2012, I think the most contrarian thought was that you could make really great venture returns in all these emerging markets. I think people just didn't really believe that. 12 years later, that first little beta fund we started and raised, it was only $10 million, but we turned it into $86 million of DPI, right? So 8.6x, and most of the returns came from Brazil, Argentina, and Turkey, right? And so I think we're showing that you can do this all over the world, and Kauffman Fellows has shown us very much the same thing.
We'll get to a little bit more about the fellowship, but Areije, you're still an LP, but what is that thing that you saw that would deliver consistently good results to you years ago as an LP?
I mean, I think it's very interesting because predominantly we were investing in MENA to help support the growth of our ecosystem. And I think, just like what Alan said, what we've seen in the past, at least 10 years, I mean, and the testament is here, also here in Riyadh at FII, where you see a bunch of startups. The startups actually in our region are far more resilient, I believe, because when they start in Bahrain or in Saudi or the UAE, when they start to expand across the region, they have to kind of effectively start over and over again because of different regulations in each ecosystem. I think what I've noticed is that even the funds that we invest in, the GPs in the region, also have different dynamics. It's like they're a little bit, again, more resilient because they have to help support their portfolio companies to expand across MENA, which is different than in the US, because in the US, if you start in one kind of state, you can easily kind of like expand and grow across a large population of consumers or whatever the state, like the type of technology you have. And what I found also is that the Kauffman Fellowship for me as an LP was a great source of kind of DD. So any time I wanted to kind of look at a fund, I just went in and was able to kind of spend a lot of time to get to know the GPs and actually really do like proper DD on a lot of them. And I've seen that our portfolio has consistently been able to kind of beat the market.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, not to highlight our work, but yes, if 1 out of 5 fellows invest in unicorns and has exits in unicorns, that's probably better odds than any other pool of VCs. Dilek, I've heard a couple of times the resilience aspect of it. You, not just as an entrepreneur GP, because I do believe GPs are entrepreneurs themselves, but the companies that you have invested in that are proving to be more successful, you mentioned recently about the resilience and how they are slightly built different to companies that can raise hundreds of millions of dollars and don't be resilient. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, maybe it's our co-investment. We can't announce the name yet, but when I invested, it was the most contrarian bet. Everybody said I was crazy. By the way, it happened over and over again. Being a contrarian worked. After 7 years, 200x, 80x's, 50x's, they come up. But I think that being a contrarian came out of the network. I want to give like a real practical story to you. I went to Endeavor event in Silicon Valley, heard about Kauffman because I wanted to be good at my job as a VC. And I joined Kauffman by like knocking their door, get me in. And then it lends you in a network that you can help your founders at the end of the day. But going back, what really brought the consistency and excellence, contrarian. And the second one was actually focusing on home runs. or like our job is a power law at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So you invested in 20 companies, as we mentioned. One of them became the returner of the whole thing. And it's easy to say, but as a human psychology, you need to fail most of the time. But you need to focus on that outlier all the time. That really made a big difference. And for me, I love my job because I also have a purpose to create an impact. But you have to be a prepared mind. Like you have to look for what is next 10 years. You have to deeply intact in the talent network. So when you saw a good founder, you have a pattern matching and help to find that company and invest. So I think those are the three things I see all the time. Contrarian, always focus on the home runs, try to not to think about the failures, you have to, and being a prepared mind at the end
I feel like
of the day.
I want to build on what you said about being contrarian. It's just a funny story, but I've been lucky enough to really learn this business from amazing peers from the Kauffman Fellows, but also from some incredible people on Endeavor's board. And the chairman of our fund is a guy called Reid Hoffman, who co-founded LinkedIn, who was one of the early angel investors in Facebook. I mean, he's an amazing investor. And when we were first setting up our fund, Reid said something to me about being contrarian that it really stuck. He goes, look, venture, at the end of the day, it's not an easy business. It's very hard to be successful, but it's pretty basic. Like it's pretty straightforward. It's not too complex. You really have to do two things. First, you have to be contrarian, and then you have to be right. in that order, right? And I think one of the things about venture is sometimes you feel wrong for a really long time because you have this contrarian view, and for 4, 5, 6, 7 years, you actually look like an idiot, right? And only 10 or 12 years later does it turn out, oh, you were right, and that pays off.
I think it's easy to be contrarian. I mean, just ask my daughters, and being contrarian is the easiest thing, but being proven right consistently, that's the hard thing. Omar, you are an entrepreneur. What's your contrarian approach, and why are people calling you crazy, and what keeps you hanging in there saying, I'm not that?
Yeah. I think two things. When we launched our first fund in 2017, it was a run-of-the-mill seed fund, $25 million, where we raised capital from family offices and high-net-worth individuals in the GCC. 90% of those LPs had never done venture. So I had to sit and explain, well, you're giving me a check. I'm either going to 10x the check for you, or it might go to zero in a figuratively speaking.
But you figured out how to say that politely in Arabic.
Exactly. Yeah. But what ended up happening, we had an early limited partner in that fund that, God bless him, because we, can really attribute a lot of our success today to him making a very early bet on myself and my team. He gave us a separate managed account to run a different strategy, and that was fund of funds. We started doing emerging manager investing way before it became a buzzword, and way before it became a sub-asset class of venture in general. And just to give you, some statistics, in our first fund, we minted 4 unicorns. That's a sort of a unicorn hit rate of about 7.5%. I think there's another 4 rising unicorns in that portfolio, so we're hopefully going to be closer to 12, 13%. But that's not the impressive part. We can pat ourselves on the back and say, hey, good job. You got into some firm and category defining companies. But what was truly remarkable was the 23 managers we backed in that separate managed account. Each manager, on average, had 2 other unicorns that he or she minted. So in aggregate, with about 57 million of AUM, which by all measures is tiny in the world of venture, we and my team got exposed to $54 billion businesses that were minted between seed and Series C. At the time, that was about 5% of the world's private market unicorns. And we sat back and said, wow, there's something here. So what we decided to do in our latest fund, which we held first close on last year, is run a hybrid strategy. And people still think we're crazy because we're like, guys, you're great seed investors. Why do you have to go invest in other VCs? And we said, the missed opportunity is not to be a consistent lifelong learner. I didn't go to Stanford. I didn't build a company and sold it for 100 million. I didn't work at Google, but I'm backing other managers that have done so. And by doing so, we're building a highly collaborative environment between us and the GPs that are raising, let's say, $25, $30 million fund ones, where we can actually deploy capital with them in their best seed and Series A ideas, and ultimately get these companies and these managers to access capital markets here in the GCC, specifically in the UAE, where we're native, for their future rounds of financing or their future funds vintages that they're looking to raise.
Great. So let me shift gears a little bit and just, in full transparency, this industry went through a nasty period over the last few years with a lack of discipline. The definition, I think, is the Twitter VC universe, no? of thinking that it's all about being very popular on Twitter and that will make you a successful VC. And we suffer from that. The industry suffered greatly from that, no question about it. The excess of that or the lack of discipline. I would like to, hopefully it doesn't seem as self-promotional, but talk a little bit about your experience with the Kauffman Fellowship in remaining focused and centered on that best practice, discipline approach to investing to achieve consistency. How do you benefit through the connections made through the fellowship? Areije, why don't we start with you?
Well, I mean, I think for me as an LP, it's been very interesting because I think when we started to invest, it was probably around 2018, 2017. And so the markets were great. Everything was wonderful. Everything was rosy. And then things started to change. I think where Kauffman Fellowship as a network, and then even as the individuals that are selected to be part of this network, you have this ability to be able to kind of be very transparent and open, to be able to say that, oh my gosh, I think I messed up. What do we do? How do we work things out? But as an LP, we came together as other LPs within the network. We also were able to discuss a lot of things with our GPs that we've invested in, but also be able to solve a lot of problems. I think we're also talking a lot about the successes that Kauffman has created, but a lot of times, even if companies don't reach unicorn status, I know for a fact that a lot of the time this kind of collaboration and kind of like family-ship, I guess, within the network has been able to save a lot of companies to still make them become successful. They might be like a couple of 100 million companies, but I always say, like, why do we always just look to strive to get unicorns? When we build ecosystems, when we create different economies, we also want to create like good revenue-generating companies. And I think that perhaps maybe next year we'll talk about that on a panel at FII. But I think
you have to come up with a clever name of a different animal.
Okay.
If you do that, then you're allowed to have a
I think
panel.
someone used camels.
Yeah. We'll talk about camels next time.
Dilek, how do you stay sane in being the crazy contrarian, but at the same time, you make some wrong bets sometimes?
Yes. Definitely we surround ourselves with really good people, like Magdalena Yeşil, who invested in Salesforce early days, Zora, SoFi. So try to bring those people who have seen it and done it before, because our job is a cycle job. So it's going to come and go, and it's a long-term game, like minimum 10 years, let's say 8 to 12 years, depending on where you are in the cycle. So how I look at it, actually following up on this, like I love capital efficient companies. Why? My success is going to come from the entry price, how much I paid at the entrance, the dilution that I have along the way, and my exit price. If I can control my entry price and my company is not spending the world out there, like, then my exit, if I can do it in a really good exit, then I have a better upside than maybe like investing in a unicorn. Just to give you a sense, now I have Silicon Valley-based companies, but also like Turkey and Eastern European-based companies. The cost base is 1/3, and the outcomes are similar. So imagine the dilution difference between companies. At least, let's say you had a $500 million exit in our part of the world. It's similar to $1 billion or $2 billion comparing to like really competitive markets. So trying to be disciplined at the entry price, if you can, because market changes. Dilution, picking the good team, and also helping them to learn faster also. That's like in our core, how we can help them learn faster with our operators around them.
Dilek, will you pass on a deal if you love the entrepreneur but you don't like the price?
Yes, I regret to. Yeah, I do.
It's an interesting topic in our industry, right? Like price discipline is so hard.
Yeah, it's also like as venture capitalists, we always say, like if you pass on deal that you regret, it hurts. Yeah, I went back to the All times.
I mean, there's a couple things about this business, and Farrell, I'll speak to your question about Kauffman, but that I think just are really hard. Like, we're fighting our own human psychology, right? Contrarian thinking is hard to do over a long period of time. The timelines involved, right? The fact that this takes 10, 12, 15 years, it's not, like, humans aren't good at that. Like, we just aren't. I think it's a Bill Gates quote where he says, like, human beings tend to vastly overestimate what we can do in 1 year, but underestimate what we can do in 10. And the way the power law works and the way compounding works, like, I think we really underestimate what's possible in a 10-year time frame. The biggest takeaway for me for Kauffman Fellows is that venture capital is a people business, right? And so this is, honestly, for folks in the room who know Endeavor, and I love Endeavor, I've worked here for 18 years, what Endeavor does for founders of creating like a trust-based network where you can really come and talk about what's going on in your business and share problems and solve problems faster because of this high degree of trust. That's what Kauffman has been for me. That's what Kauffman creates for GPs and fund managers. And frankly, it allows us to move forward a lot more quickly, right? Because if we, in these lower trust environments, when shit goes wrong, sorry, I don't know if you can say that at FII, when stuff goes wrong, it doesn't get solved very quickly, right? Because there's not a ton of trust and people aren't sure what they can share. And in Kauffman, things get solved fast, right? And Areije talked about it's for companies that are struggling, it's for companies that are flying. And I don't know, it's that high trust environment that I think has mattered the most.
I agree. And Omar, before we get to you, that again, for the audience, one of the things that I think that we do better than anyone else in the industry, in the world, is we're bringing venture capitalists into our network for the first time. And the first time they fly to meet us in San Francisco or New York or wherever we are in the world, we don't talk a whole lot about venture capital. We talk about human emotion and behavior and the vulnerability that it requires to understand that you don't know what you don't know. Yeah. Even if you're in a profession that sometimes you have to project that you know a lot of stuff that you don't know about. And that is an incredibly powerful moment to have that vulnerability, along with the confidentiality of making sure that nobody in this room is going to talk about it. But being vulnerable in the face of adversity for a long period of time, Allen, it's against human nature. So Omar, that question to you, the same one. How do you stay sane in this?
How do I stay sane? Well, I'll make one comment first. When I initially looked to apply to be part of the network, and I asked existing fellows, how would you describe Kauffman Fellows?
I think I was one of them too.
Probably. I can't remember whether this was you, Areije, but someone wise told me it's venture capital therapy. I'm like, what does that mean? I think 4 or 5 years later, after having started the program, I know exactly what that means, right? I think the sanity in this business, and Alan, you mentioned it, the feedback loops, especially in early stage, are so long. You could be doing this for a decade and still not sure whether you're good at it. So trying to go through that psychological ebbs and flows of the cycle, but also your performance, the pressure you get from LPs, the pressure you get from your partners, what happens at the board level in companies, what happens between founders in a certain business, right? I think having the stomach to weather that volatility is extremely important, right? So if I were to learn anything, being an early stage investor is, one, be consistent across your approach, leverage the people around you, and especially at my network in Kauffman, which has been insurmountably important to my success, both personally and professionally. I ran some empirical statistics the other day. Out of the 120 direct deals that I had done through the firm since 2017, 28 of them, I share the cap table with Kauffman Fellows. That's incredible, right? I've already written 3 LP checks in 3 Kauffman Fellows through my latest fund, and I expect that number to go up significantly. And finally, most importantly, I've built true, authentic, lifelong friendships with people who are able to frankly put their ego at the door, walk into a room and say, hey, I also have imposter syndrome. There's a lot that I still need to learn. I don't know why LPs gave me $300 million to manage. I'm still trying to figure out what they see in me. But please let me open up my vulnerability and be able to learn from you so I can be a better investor and better human being.
I think I would encourage all of you to download the report. If anything, just to look at those 50 fellows that have consistently found great results, because if one thing comes across is they came up with this investment thesis years ago, and they stayed on it without knowing if it was going to succeed or not. And that implies your investment strategy, which determines the size of the check, the ownership target that you're going to have, the total number of investments within your portfolio construction, the support platform that you offer those entrepreneurs, and just hope that it's going to work out for the long term. Of course, you have early signals that you may adjust or not. But I think that's the consistency means that you stay true to your original investment thesis that you came up with. So last 5 minutes of the panel. This is too broad of a question, and I'm sorry for everyone here, but recognizing that we don't know what we don't know, what do you think will happen in this industry in the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, if you look at it from your own investment thesis perspective?
Well, it's hard to make, what's the quote? It's hard to make predictions, especially about the future. But Dilek will tell us the first prediction.
Oh, thank you. So not a prediction, but what I'm thinking now. So our job is to find the best founders who are going to create those legendary companies. I'm thinking in two ways. Obviously, FII was all about AI. It's definitely changing. It's a super cycle, we know. But we also know from the history, railroads, canals, telegraph. So when they came in, there was a huge rush to invest in the infrastructure. And we know what happened after that. But when it goes up to the application layer, it's where the potential is. So what I'm thinking now, we invested a lot in the infrastructure. Now I think it's going to be more like the operational level and application. Those are going to change a lot. But also, there's going to be so much competition. And everybody can reach out anywhere now. Like we were talking about with a sales expert for our companies. He said it's going to be 1/5 of the cost to reach a customer. Sales is going to be everywhere. You are going to reach out customers, but where they are going to be bombarded by so much competition. So how you are going to differentiate? For me, I think it's going to be more human touch, to be honest. You have to be present. You have to touch your customer, talk to them. And also, AI application layer is going to be the opportunity that I will be looking for.
So I think a couple of predictions. One, let's talk about the industry itself very quickly. I think venture tourists are going to disappear. Anybody who, aped into this industry, just to use a very, crypto term, in 2021 got completely burnt, either as a new venture capitalist or a family office or someone that had never done venture before. Because 3 years later, some of these funds are still under the J-curve with no markups and absolutely no exits. So that's going to be challenging, but that's good. I think the industry needs to revert back to what I feel is more a Silicon Valley type culture. I remember the first demo day I did with Y Combinator in 2017. It was cozy in the Computer History Museum in Silicon Valley, 120 investors, 100 startups, very personal. Y Combinator absolutely exploded since. Now there's thousands of companies that go through the program and thousands of investors that do it virtually. I think that's going to change. That's kind of one prediction. Secondly, just to requote Sam Altman, we're going to see a world where there's a one-man unicorn or a one-woman unicorn because of the advent of AI. And that proves to me that early stage investing is going to go back to its roots. While there's oodles and billions of dollars of capital that were raised for late stage firms, either here in the region or in the US, I think after Masayoshi-san set the standard at 100 billion, I think those kind of funds are going to start to disappear. If you're not early in companies, you're going to be totally out because of the advent of AI. And then finally, I think, to Dilek's point, this is an AI super cycle, but it's so fast moving, right, that there's going to be some really interesting, unpredictable turns and curvatures in this industry that we really can't predict at this point, that we just have to be all prepared for.
Allen, you get second to last, and Areije will
I'll
close
do it
with
real quick and give Areije the last word. I guess specifically to this lens of where does this business go? If we think about ventures being a people business, then I think the future, AI will come and replace things that are better done by a non-human, right? And a bunch of investing actually will go that way. Later stage investing, algorithmic investing, anything with lots of data in it. Sure, AI is going to be really good at that. But if this is a craft of connecting with human beings, especially really resilient, crazy ones who essentially are doing things that don't fit a pattern, then the data won't predict it, right? And it'll still rely on human beings to make those choices on who are those remarkable humans. And so this kind of bigger framework of asking ourselves like, well, if humans don't have to do everything anymore, what are we uniquely positioned to keep doing? I think early stage venture is one of those
100%.
things.
Areije, you have a minute to close us down. What's going to happen in the future?
I think, again, just to add and complement everything here on the panel, I think we're actually at a turning point as to a lot of the technologies that we've invested in very early stage. We're starting to see a lot of it come to fruition. And I think where I see is that we need to be able to have a little bit of humility as either like investors or as consumers of this technology to be able to embrace this change. Everyone talks about fear of AI and all of these things, but in reality, I think we need to start, keeping an open mind to be able to see how we actually can evolve with a lot of these technologies. And I think being able to be an LP has given me the ability to see a lot of this happening firsthand. And then also as consumers, all of us need to kind of stay close to what's been going on. So I think maybe in the end, this venture space is actually touching all of our industries, starting from consumer all the way to the energy sector. So we'll be seeing,
A specific one that Areije will benefit from with all the great positions she is in these funds. The next 3 to 5 years, we'll see the completion of the first major cycle of venture capital in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Right? We're not there yet, but we're going to get there.
So next year we're going to talk about like what our investors as an LP in Kauffman has created, and I think we have
So we're closing with this, which is venture capitalists are entrepreneurs at the bottom, and those that are resilient will see an incredible future ahead of this industry. We run out of time. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the panelists.
Thank you.